Lordy.
Okay, Chairman, we are now streaming live from on YouTube. I'll hand the meeting over to yourself. Handing the meeting over to you, Chairman.
Unfortunately, he's been kicked out of the meeting. I think Councillor Hayward might have to take over.
Just allow me to get my script for a moment. Bear with me a second. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. In the absence of Councillor Arnott, who I'm sure will be joining us in a few moments, welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual Cabinet meeting on the 11th of November 2020. I am your Vice Chair, Councillor Paul Hayward, standing in for the Chair, Councillor Paul Arnott. I'd also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn off any devices, telephone devices, or put them on silent. As this Cabinet meeting is dependent on internet connection, and Councillor Arnott has proved that point, and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep your points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and please do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. Any councillor or all councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphones? And when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Amanda.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Hayward.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Slowly.
Oh, present.
Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Ledger.
Present.
Councillor Rickson.
Present.
Councillor Rowland.
Present.
Councillor Loudon.
Present.
Councillor Jackson.
Present.
And Chair Councillor Arnott with us yet. Not at the moment, but obviously we know he's trying to get in. Okay, I can confirm, Vice Chair, that you are quorum today.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. Okay, so we'll continue to go through the agenda. And bear with me one moment while I just call this up. So item 1, public speaking. We have a question from a Mr. Ed Cos, apologise for my pronunciation if it's not correct. Re the Climate Council's Climate Emergency Plan. So, Amanda, if Mr. Coss is not attending, are you happy to read out his question, or is he with us?
Mr. Coss is with us.
Hello.
Vice Chair.
Hello, Mr. Coss. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you to everyone for all you're doing in what was no doubt a difficult year. We've got one crisis with COVID, but the climate crisis continues. So I understand from recent email correspondence with councillors that the emergency plan has not been implemented as planned this year, understandably due to the pandemic, but that progress is being made behind the scenes and a new version of the plan is forthcoming. And I'm told the current status of the project is not available to the public in detail, nor are there plans to engage the public at present. And I've not been informed when a new plan will be made available. So my question is, please can the council explain why the status of the climate emergency plan is not available? And please commit to prioritising a detailed update by a specific date with timelines, roles and responsibilities, and a clear roadmap to engage the public, such as through the Exeter University proposal for the Citizens' Assembly. So the question is to please explain the status and when that will be forthcoming in detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I understand that the strategic lead for housing, health and environment has responded to you, Mr. Coss. Have you received that response?
Yes.
You have. Is there anything you'd like to add further, or is that response satisfy your inquiry?
I would love to say that it had satisfied my inquiry, and I do appreciate all the efforts that are being made. The plan that is available online appears to be outdated, and I was informed by Councillor Rickson that a new one will be forthcoming. And I think it would be great to know what the status is. The clarity isn't there for me, and I think that, you know, we need to engage the public on this really crucial issue, and it seems that that isn't happening at the moment in the way that it should be. So that remains my issue and my question.
Councillor Rickson, as portfolio holder, are you happy to respond to Mr. Coss?
Definitely.
Thank you.
I think perhaps that the questioner has confused the district council and the county council's work on climate change. I can confirm that addressing climate change is a priority for both councils. Our climate change strategy and action plan went through the council's democratic processes earlier this year and has been openly published on our website. It is a statement of intention, and we recognise the need for regular reviews and updates. We're also committed to delivering the Devon Climate Change Emergency Declaration and are working with the County Council contributing towards the emerging Devon Carbon Plan. And I'm happy to report that the Carbon Plan consultation will take place between December this year and February 2021. Social media and webinars are already being planned. DCC have run a series of themed inquiry sessions and have the proposals for running a citizens' assembly to inform the county-wide carbon plan. Again, I can confirm today that DCC are expecting a report imminently from Exeter University. Whilst it is fair to say that the council's response to the pandemic has taken priority, we have progressed a number of commitments and built in some green recovery ideas to our thinking, including reduced commuting, green travel and community resilience. Despite the necessary distractions of the pandemic, we have been progressing a number of projects from our action plan over the last 6 months, including but not limited to appointing a portfolio holder and assistant to the Cabinet, electrification of our white vehicle fleet in street scene and environmental health, installation of air source heat pumps in council homes through securing £500,000 in government grant, rollout of rewilding and nature recovery areas, increased tree planting and creation and improvement of wildlife habitats, increased our recycling rate beyond 60% of household waste, that's one of the best in the country, and introduced a green waste scheme. We are working with Exeter Airport to decarbonise air travel, developing concepts for district heating in the Growth Point area, scoping a review of procurement activities and decarbonising supply chains. In addition, we have experimented with using the donut economic model to assist decision-making that prioritises climate change. So I would suggest that our plans are publicly available and have roles and responsibility, timelines and accountability embedded, but our plans will be reviewed. Devon Carbon Plan is developed. And as we learn from current projects and move closer towards significant carbon reductions as an organisation.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and thank you very much, Councillor Haywood, for stepping in, and apologies for an internet meltdown at the Colleton end. Not sure what that was. Thank you very much. We have a second question, I believe, from Mr. Craig Bernhardt. Amanda.
Yes, that's correct. And I understand Mr. Bernhardt is actually here in the meeting.
Yes, that's correct. Good evening, everybody. And firstly, apologies for the fact that I have no video. It appears that I'm all zoomed out through these lockdowns and it's decided to malfunction on me. So my apologies. It's more of a statement than a question. And it's just with regard to a piece that you'll be discussing, I believe, later on with regard to Leisure East Devon. I am 100% in support of funding assistance that translates into improving the health and the lives of our local communities and helps reduce the burden that puts on our NHS. There is no denying the importance of accessible and inclusive facilities that would support social value and social impact on our communities, nor have I got any doubt in my mind that the LED provide essential community services through their extensive outreach work, and that must continue. However, the majority of the issues that I read in the paper seem to be laid at the door of COVID. And this is a pandemic that has had an impact on every public and private health in the country. Yet my business and many other independents who I'm in communication with have seen member loyalty levels throughout lockdown in excess of 30% and returning members in excess of 80%. So I ask why this is not similar for not only LED, but other leisure centres that I've spoken with. And could it be because the landscape of health and fitness is changing, none more so than in the consumer habits and expectations of the average gym and exercise class attendee? Now, the last decade alone has seen a huge increase in the health and fitness sector, with state-of-the-art private gyms opening new facilities and incorporating modern, efficient technology and strategies for procurement that further enhance their profitability and customer-centric focus. Now, this is only going to continue as far as I see it. And as the competition heats up, the large gym chains, along with new groups, are going to continue to emerge. They're going to evolve and they're going to expand. And in turn, that will put increased stress and strain on the operating models and the finances of many leisure centres and many independents across the length and breadth of this country. Now, conversations I've been party to would suggest that leisure centres are and have been struggling for some time now, which leaves me pondering the question of whether or not the current operating model is sustainable and what needs to change. Now, with such large sums of central funds at stake, you cannot underestimate the impact of failing to get this right. And in the words of Albert Einstein, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And you certainly don't want to find yourself back in this position again. So to pray-see my point, I would just suggest that within the proposal, it may be prudent to consider a paradigm shift and have leaders from both local, private and public sector facilities collaborate for once and work together. In addition to dealing with the ramifications of COVID, consider the objectives of minimising service duplication and maximising efficiency of delivery in unique and essential recreational activities, but furthermore ensure longevity of these vital services that support the communities we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernhardt. As you can imagine, this is something we have discussed a huge amount over the last couple of months. And I know I believe you run a gym in Honiton as well, which is fantastic. As far as LED is concerned, there are very specific problems. We have got, obviously...
Oh.
Yes, that showed the leader immediately leaving. So perhaps Councillor Haywood can carry on. I obviously appreciate you can't say what Councillor Arnold was about to say. But I think in terms of the meeting carrying on, either you want to give it a minute or we move straight to the report and Councillor Arnold can say what he was going to say to the speaker when he comes back.
If everyone's happy to give it a few moments, my internet is clicking in and off here. It's maintained, but I think we're having a bit of an atmospheric issue across the entire district. But if everyone's happy, just to give it a pause for a minute, 2 minutes, and see if Councillor Arnott comes back. If not, we'll carry on, proceed. Is everyone okay with that? I'll try and see as many people on the screen as I can. Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. Thank you. This is when we need some entertainment. Jugglers or balloon modelers.
Look at my head ball if you want.
Gymnast, that's what you need.
Well, Charlie's in charge of culture. Come on, Charlie, give us a show.
Can we perhaps do a rendition of Happy Birthday then? That might get Councillor Arnott back in.
Possibly. I was just looking at Charlie thinking, if that is your very best finger puppet performance, you seem to have forgotten the most important thing, which is the puppet on the end of your finger.
Can I take this opportunity then, while there's a pause, just to say thank you to everybody who donated to this thing here. Thank you, everybody.
Well done, Joe.
Thank you. Apologies.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Councillor Haywood, for stepping in. I'm very sorry about my internet connection. And as one of the sponsors of Councillor Wigley, I'd like to applaud his efforts. I've done it myself as well, but not sponsored. Just
yeah. There's 20 quid in the post, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so I'm guessing I was cut off in my prime when giving some response to Mr. Bernhardt, so apologies for that, and probably that was enough for me in any case. Have we got to apologies yet, Amanda?
Not yet, Chairman. No, we haven't. No,
Okay.
We haven't got to apologies yet. I wasn't sure if you wanted to finish what you were saying to Mr. Bernhardt.
Since I can't, I don't know when I was cut off, so probably nothing much more to say that won't come up in the debate, but just to thank Mr. Bernhardt for his contribution. Agenda item 2 then is apologies. Do we have any?
I have none, Chair.
Okay. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Cabinet, do we have any declarations of interest this evening?
Will this be done by roll call?
I'll go through a roll call. Councillor Arnott.
None.
Councillor Haywood.
None, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
None.
Councillor Bailey.
None.
Councillor Young.
None.
Councillor Ledger.
None, thank you.
Councillor Rickson.
None.
Councillor Rowland.
None.
Councillor Loudon.
None, thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
None, thanks, Amanda.
Okay, Chair, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda, very much. Agenda item 4 is matters of urgency. Yes, that is why we are meeting tonight, which comes up at agenda item 2, and it is called LED additional funding as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Agenda item 5, confidential or exempt items, and there are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way this evening. And so we come to agenda item 6, which, as I said, is called additional LED financial support as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and proposals for a new LED monitoring committee arrangement. I'm very pleased we have a report to start this off from Charlie Plowden, the Service Lead Countryside and Leisure. Over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. First of all, just to welcome Peter Gilpin, the Chief Exec for LED, and Bridget Jones, who's Head of Finance for LED. So they're here and will be able to, I'm sure, answer questions from an operational nature as it comes through. Chair, if I can just very briefly just touch upon the leisure industry along with the wider cultural industry has probably been the hardest hit by the lockdown, as in sort of first to close and last to reopen, perhaps apart from theatres. So consequently, income streams have collapsed with all the implications that this entails. LED has, as I hope this report shows, reacted swiftly and decisively to try and mitigate these impacts and put in place a recovery business plan that up to the end of September has helped it to recover to around about 70% of its expected income, which is a fantastic achievement. However, challenges do remain, and with this further period of lockdown and beyond, which no doubt Cabinet will be discussing tonight with Peter and Bridget. So the report in a nutshell seeks to provide an urgent subsidy of £732,000 to ensure LED can remain operational going forward, an agreement that further payments will be required until the end of the financial year. Also, due to the multiple risks and challenges being faced by LED and the Council as a sponsor of LED, a new monitoring forum is being proposed to be set up that will help better support and scrutinise LED's operational and financial asks going forward. So finally, I just want to highlight two issues perhaps not recognised within the report. Firstly, the production of this report came before lockdown 2 was announced, which may mean that there are further risks that LED may face, which again, Peter and Bridget can perhaps best answer for us. And secondly, it's proposed that further financial support is provided by East Devon District Council on a monthly basis, subject to receiving detailed financial reports from LED rather than quarterly, as detailed in section 2.14, along similar lines that LED have currently with South Somerset District Council on their leisure facilities. So again, just to hopefully bear that in mind with this discussion. And we have obviously Mark here, Simon and Henry, to take any questions on our finances specifically and the proposed makeup of the LED monitoring forum. But I know, as you quite rightly said, Chair, we've discussed this a lot in the last couple of months. So maybe if I just park it there and allow this sort of discussion and debate to follow. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you, Peter and Bridget, being here tonight and with our other officers as well. I don't think I'll queue you up just yet. If it's okay to have you there in reserve to take any questions that people might have. So can I first come please to members who aren't on Cabinet, if you can raise your blue hands. Yes, Councillor Brewster Sarum first, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I think that looking at the report, certainly it would not be a good outcome for if we were to adopt para 4.2 or 4.4 were it to be implemented. That would be a very negative thing. So my question is, South Somerset District Council have provided a letter of support to fund losses with funding cap of 431,000 approximately. Why is our potential subsidy of 732 so much higher? And if we are to provide this money and set up this monitoring forum, I would suggest that even allowing for COVID, as one of the speakers tonight said, that the operational model undergoes a rigorous transformation type strategy to ensure that it becomes fully fit for purpose after 31st of March. I'm not saying that it wasn't fully fit for purpose, but I believe that we have a duty to our residents to ensure that this recommendation will deliver sustainable long-term growth, as the speaker said earlier on tonight. So that's especially as private gyms are also struggling financially, as I know from the correspondence that I've received in my own ward. So that's really the question that I wanted to put to members tonight. Clearly, we don't want the 4.2 or the 4.4 solution, but we need to find the right solution, which will not commit the council to large funding if South Somerset can then deal with 431 odd. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor De Sarum. And I'll come to an officer in just a second. But just to reiterate, it may get lost in my internet meltdown earlier. We have been considering this for months, and we are very aware that there will be a public perception and a member perception that at this stage East Devon is having to help LED out through no fault of LED at all. This is entirely caused by the pandemic. As an associated fact to that, we know that other authorities whose leisure provision is provided in-house have been able to draw down on government funds covering roughly 70 to 75% of the losses during that same period. Unfortunately, we are not in that position. That is what has brought us here to this pass today. There is serendipity in it, I think, because as we approach the renegotiation of the service level agreement with LED, which falls due at the beginning of April, this has focused our minds, and that is why we have come up with this idea of the membership forum, which, as I said earlier, it's a wider representation, and it should allow, I think, and it will meet monthly, as has been said by Charlie, it should allow us, I hope, Bruce, to address exactly the concerns you've got. And the other thing is, I think we have to be very careful we're not comparing apples and oranges here. LED have got an immense overhead, swimming pools. So running a swimming pool with all of the capital and revenue effects that has at the best of times, you cannot really compare with a lock-up gym with some equipment ranged along the walls. These are different entities. LED has a clear social purpose as well. Whenever I go to the gym down in Seaton, it has got many people in there who have been referred by GPs. And so, although other gyms I know are getting into that whole area of health benefit, I mean, serious public health benefit, LED are well ahead in this area, I think. I think the other thing we also understand is that LED cannot compete with David Lloyd's type high-end gyms and leisure facilities, and nor would they want to. But equally, they cannot compete with somebody who has simply set up somewhere on a trading estate. It is a different entity, and it's a very broad and complex organisation. So I only say all that now. I'm not the expert here, but I wonder, Peter, would you just like to say a few words in response to Councillor Desaram as well?
Yes, if I may, Chairman, thank you. And also perhaps pick up a couple of the earlier points. Why are South Somerset only paying us 430,000? Quite simply, we've only got 3 sites there, and we have 9 sites in East Devon. And as Councillor Arnott says, we are running 2 swimming pools in South Somerset, which are much smaller pools and require much less subsidy. So it is comparing apples and oranges, just 3 sites in South Somerset compared with 9 sites in East Devon. And just to pick up an earlier point, Chair, if I may, I'm picking up your point as well, to just explain very briefly the difference between LED and perhaps one of the private operators and the ones that Mr. Bernhardt are referring to. Yeah, we would welcome closer collaboration with the private sector, but we are very different to the private sector. We are a community benefit society, a registered charitable trust, and all of our revenues that are generated and any surpluses go back into providing facilities and services and new equipment. They do not go to shareholders, they don't go to company owners, and they don't go to private companies. Ours is a community benefit society, and the money goes back in. And yes, our activities in terms of health and fitness are profitable. They're very popular. We have 15,000 members across the 2 counties, probably about 12,000 members in East Devon. A big proportion of those are swimming members, and we teach children to learn to swim. We teach adults to learn to swim. And obviously with coastal towns, swimming is a very vital life skill. But so you might ask the question, why do we require a subsidy? Well, our health and fitness operations are profitable, and the income from those are what we use to subsidise swimming and our other community activities as a community benefit society. So we are out there, we're focusing on families, on children, on unemployed, on people on benefits and universal credit. So we serve a much wider community than the private sector do. And because we put on a lot of community benefit activities that are not commercially viable, that's why we require the subsidy from yourselves, particularly for running swimming pools. And this is down to COVID. Our turnover is usually was up to about £12 million a year. So even a poor mathematician like myself can say that's £1 million a month almost of lost revenue. And we were shut completely for 3 months, April, May and June, with no revenue whatsoever. And the reason why we're now here asking for that to be rectified is because we've had to draw heavily upon our reserves to cover those losses. And also, I have to admit that during that period, we wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for the furlough scheme. So we had over 600 staff furloughed. Our payroll is £6.5 million within East Devon. We employ about 500 people, and our payroll is about 4.5 million in East Devon. And I think we put back about £5 million into the local economy through employing those people and through engaging with local suppliers. So I think we are a vital part of the local community. I think we provide a far broader service than a lot of people realise. And it is a service for the benefit of the community, not for shareholders, not for company owners. And that's probably what I'd like to say at the moment, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. And just to explain to people who may be watching on YouTube and aren't familiar, Peter Gilpin is the CEO of LED Leisure, which has already been explained is in fact a charitable trust as well. Can I come to Councillor Sam Hawkins next, please?
Thank you, Chair. First, can I just thank Simon Davey and Bridget at LED? I was asking a few awkward questions yesterday just to try and get up to speed with this. So my specialism is corporate recovery. So I very much wanted to look at this from this angle, and as EDDC being effectively the customer here, just working out how we can protect our position if it needs protecting and not expose ourselves in, I think unnecessarily spend is the wrong phrase, but to not spend money where not needed to spend money. I was getting quite hung up on this subsidy of the 732,000 that's been recommended. So as I see it, to bring LED back to the position they would have been at before COVID. Now I understand that some of that has come back because Cabinet, I believe, agreed to already open swimming pools or assist in that. So I wouldn't want to renegade on that position. We've asked them intentionally to incur losses. So I think that's a given. At that point, you can't then back out of making good on that agreement. Where my concern was is if we know we as a council are taking a loss, we know other organisations are taking losses. It didn't feel right that LED should be back to exactly the same position they were at. They need to share in the loss if you look at it as us being a separate organisation. Obviously, there's a whole community argument and that kind of basis. If you were to properly teach this as a business, you'd probably say, well, let's stick it into a pre-pack administration and worry about it next April. But I don't think anyone would say that's the answer in this circumstance whatsoever. I do still have concerns about whether that 700 figure is the right figure or whether it needs to be and can be lower. We're looking to effectively guarantee future spending, and I don't know how that's going to be structured. If we end up giving them the money in advance of each month they need it, this 700,000 feels like it's just to go back into a bank account and sit there. If then the future amounts are going, obviously working capital fits into it, or so it's just to pull up that. And the other point I really wanted to raise is around this forum that's being put forward is sort of the new restructuring vehicle, or the way to help decide in the future. I think it either needs access to, or it needs to have an independent expert on it as well, someone who just knows what they're saying. 10 people in a pub can always come up with a great idea of how to run and save businesses, but that doesn't necessarily mean these are good ideas. So it's just making sure that that forum's got some kind of a strategic advice of an appropriate level and nature.
Okay, thanks, Sam, very much for that. I hope you'll be unsurprised to know that we in Cabinet have been asking exactly these questions for the last 2 months, and probably slightly robustly as well, which I felt had to happen because it is a lot of money. I think the best thing to do is go to Simon Davey in a second, but we actually had a discussion today about the idea of bringing independent advice in as well. And so I think that is something we would certainly be doing, we would want to do. And I imagine at the first meeting of the forum, which will be soon, we will make decisions precisely like that, to bring that in. So as you can understand, we're walking a tightrope here between wanting to try and keep this thing going, but also not writing a blank check, because that is not what any of us are doing. But Simon, can I ask you to come in, please, our strategic lead for finance, just to answer some of Sam's concerns?
Certainly, Chair, and following me, perhaps Bridget or Peter might want to come in afterwards. in terms of the correct advice onto the forum, as you said, that is already something Cabinet has made a comment on, and we will be looking at in terms of the forum being able to call in appropriate advice at the right time. So that, I think, has been already covered off in the wish of Cabinet in terms of forming the forum. In terms of the amount to date payment of 732,000 in the recommendation, that's the amount of loss that's been incurred to date, additional loss, if you like, over and above our normal subsidy, evidenced against each individual site. That's the net loss after all mitigation by LED in terms of furlough, in terms of closing facilities and reducing staff costs where possible. And I'm sure Peter and Bridget will cover it off in more detail, and there are details in the report in terms of the amounts of how they've tried to mitigate as many costs as possible during the lockdown period. And also in terms of reopening, how best to protect membership, still encourage membership income. So basically trying to do all they can, as you would expect of a charity trust, to trade at the best possible case to bring down the lowest possible subsidy that they're asking for East Devon. I understand the point being raised by Councillor Miller in terms of the payment puts
Councillor Hawkins, Simon.
Sorry.
I think Sam would want me to make that clear.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hawkins, in terms of giving them the net payment that puts them back in that position. But LED have basically used up virtually their total reserves, group reserves. So this isn't reserves that are just allocated for East Devon's purpose, in terms of they weren't created just from East Devon's activities. These are group reserves of the company and the trust. They virtually used that figure up now in terms of being able to continue trading. And I think they're at a position, but they can speak for themselves, in terms of if they're not reimbursed that sort of level of income, I think their board of trustees would find it very difficult to consider to carry on trading without that working capital available. And I think that's what the request is for.
Okay, thank you, Simon, very much on that. Just going back to Councillor Hawkins briefly, we'll have to decide a little bit later on in the meeting what the constitution of the monitoring forum is. And I'm just looking at it here, and there will be space for 4 members who are not part of the administration. So let's say there was somebody, for sake of argument, with experience in corporate recovery who was minded to put themselves forward. That might be helpful. So just putting that idea out there. Okay, I don't know if anybody can hear me, but I can see some movement. So let's go, please, to Councillor Andrew Moulding.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to first of all take you back to 2005. At that time, I was chairman of what was then called the Amenities Committee, would now, I suppose, have been portfolio for that area. And at that time, East Devon District Council ran its own in-house leisure services, and we had David Paget, some of you will remember him and some will know the name, who was in actual fact the chief amenities officer at the time. And there were discussions taking place at that time. I was working for Somerset County Cricket Club and was involved with most of the local authorities in the southwest. And at that time, a number of those local authorities were choosing to work with an arm's length leisure organisation rather than running it in-house. And so discussions took place, and eventually over time, and in 2006, LED was formed, and David Paget became its chief executive. And the main reasons for doing that were initially to gain benefits, significant benefits, which are still gained by the fact that business rates are not applicable to a trust, and therefore the business rates which previously the council was paying on its facility, buildings and so on was no longer deemed to be payable by the district council. There were VAT benefits at that time, but significantly there were benefits regarding staffing, where rather than the staff being directly employed by the council, they were employed by the trust, and therefore the trust needed to ensure that they kept a tight rein on the number of staff they employed and the way they engaged that staff. And once the decision was made to transfer to an arm's length trust, those responsibilities of staffing no longer rested with the district council. Whilst I'm in the middle of speaking, Chair, can I just say that at the start I should have declared an interest, because I am president of Cllr Lawn Sports Centre in Axminster, and Cllr Lawn Sports Centre has had discussions with LED Leisure over the deployment of leisure within the Axminster area. So I just thought I ought to make that point if I could. So I declare my interest.
Okay,
so, sorry?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Moulding. That will be noted. Can I ask you to keep, only because I'm aware that officers as well are having major internet connection problems tonight. Right. If you can draw reasonably close to a close, Andrew.
Yes, I'm probably going to now, because I'm very much in support of the recommendations as stated. LED Leisure have done a brilliant job under Peter Gilpin, who joined in 2010. And during that time, they've provided a number of benefits. Referrals from GPs, passport to leisure have all been introduced that have been very, very popular. And during this pandemic, they've obviously suffered considerably, and we would not wish to compromise the physical fitness and mental strength of our residents. And I think we very much need to keep LED Leisure in business as it's going to move forward through this pandemic and come out the other side. There are, as Peter Gilpin said, 12,000 members in East Devon, and we want those 12,000 members to continue to enjoy the leisure service that are provided. I agree that independent advice on the monitoring group would be a good thing. And just a point that I think you made at the start was that you mentioned that one could possibly draw down funding from central government if the organisation was in-house. But the point there, of course, is that support from central government would be a one-off, whereas the benefits of being an arm's length trust are the benefits of business rates and staffing situations would still prevail well beyond the pandemic. So I think I don't think we want to get cajoled into thinking about going as an in-house organisation just so that we might be able to draw down some money from central government.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Moulding. And I'm pretty sure that's not on the agenda at all, what you just mentioned about going in-house. Can I come please to Councillor Tom Wright, and again with a plea to all speakers about this problem we're having with the internet. So if you can keep it under a couple of minutes, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Yes,
Councillor Wright, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've had experience of both the private sector and LED. I was a member of the Cranbrook Gym, and then I became a member of LED and was a member until a couple of years ago. And the one thing, and this is, if you like, more looking forward, the one thing that attracted me to LED, bearing in mind it had far better services, far better equipment, far better everything than the quite high quality members club that I was a member of, was that for no difference in subscription, I actually had the use of a swimming pool. Now, I've always been a gym user and a swimmer. In fact, on my 70th birthday, I was pleased to say I went to the gym at Exmouth and swam a mile of crawling. It absolutely knackered me for a year afterwards, but or at least I did manage to do it. But what I want to point out is a big difference in the operation of those organisations. Cranbrook Gym was full of what one would probably call gym bunnies, who really didn't need it for their health. They were there quite well, quite rationally providing improving their fitness. I think sometimes improving their vanity. But what I did notice, and I know Councillor Dent, a regular user of Exmouth Gym, will verify, is that the Exmouth Gym, LED Gym, catered for a far wider cohort of customers, both by way of age, both by way of physical and in many cases mental ability. And those people would probably not have been comfortable in the surroundings and the customers and the gym bunnies who are using the private gym. So we can't underestimate the value that LED does give to those people who otherwise might not feel inclined to use a gym. But I do say, on a looking forward point of view, bearing in mind the cost of the swimming pool, there might be some room for manoeuvre in adjusting their subscriptions so that those of us who use a gym actually do pay a reasonable price for the added advantage of using the swimming pool. So that's the only thing I want to say, but we mustn't confuse the service LED does, not just in its gyms, but its outreach activities, which are also of great value to a great number of people who never go near a gym, but whose health and well-being benefit as a result of those outreach facilities which LED offer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright, for the benefit of your experience with LED there as well, and thank you for that. Can I just remind members what we need to talk about tonight is the recommendations that are put before Cabinet. So if you can stick to that as much as possible, I'd be very grateful. Councillor Philip Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate some of the things that have been said, because I think it's really important.
Councillor Skinner, can I have to ask you, please don't reiterate any points that have previously been made. If they're fresh points, please make them. If not, we do have a time issue. So over to you, please.
I want to look at the reason why we're here. Well, the reason why we're here is to be looking at funding LED. I think LED does a fantastic job, and it actually covers a lot of the people that can't actually perhaps outreach to some of these private gyms. So it plays a different role, and I think that's really important to understand that. As far as the subsidy money going and looking at the recommendations, and quite rightly what was said before, and that there was somewhere where I saw where we're talking about whether it comes in-house. That's obviously not something I would be very supportive of. I mean, running LED as it has been run at the moment, it's been run. That's not,
Councillor Skinner, that isn't a recommendation tonight.
Well, good. Well, then I'm
making to another point or move on, please?
Then I'm making my point that's something that I'm not going to support, and neither is Councillor Modity spoke of before.
Good.
And if you're not going to support it, that's good as well. Then, as far as we're moving forward with supporting LED in the reimbursement of funding in going forward, I'm absolutely supportive of that. I think Peter Gilpin and his team do a great job, but it's really important that the job of health and well-being is so fundamentally important that the problem where we have is the cost of not having health and not having gyms, in the way that the LED is providing its service, has actually other implications that don't actually land at the door of LED, but could land at the door of the NHS, and that is people not having health. It is so fundamentally important that the outreach that the council, through LED as an arm reach organisation, is doing is absolutely fundamentally important, and I'm fully supportive, and I'm going to be supportive of the 4 recommendations that have been put forward in this particular commendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Nick Hookway, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'll try and be as brief as possible. And I'm going to really bring up the item of the Ocean building, which I've talked to Cabinet before about, which is in my ward, and the fact that as a very large building, it's underutilised, and it was only just before the pandemic that it had managed to deliver a trading profit. And now, in view of a number of factors, such as the fact that LED do need to make a profit, the need for this council to generate more income to meet the predicted future financial challenges, the fact that East Devon District Council is now the landlord of the Ocean, and that the location of the Ocean building on Queen's Drive is fundamental to the successes of the regeneration of Queen's Drive, my question is this: what arrangements can now be made to develop a sustainable partnership between East Devon District Council and LED that will deliver benefits to both parties, such as greater income and long-term financial stability? I would say I do particularly support recommendation 4. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hookway. It's quite a broad question, that, isn't it? Which we must address. I'm trying to think whether this is who this is really a question for, because it's about the relationship moving forward, isn't it? You've mentioned the Ocean, and we do know that Ocean is LED Enterprises, which is to a certain extent a separate entity and not actually germane tonight. But I mean, Peter, can you give us a minute on that, do you think, please?
Yeah, happy to do so, Chairman. Yeah, we have a 25-year lease on Ocean. We've used up 5 years. As Councillor Hookway mentioned, and is fully aware because he was on our board for a while, it has taken us the majority of those first 5 years to get Ocean into a profit, but it is now profitable. It was profitable before COVID, then it shut for 3 months, and when we reopened, Ocean was rammed for the summer and rammed up till October half term. And will start to generate a substantial return to LED in time once we get through COVID. And that is the issue at the moment, it's getting through COVID. And we would welcome the opportunity to discuss with the council on the long-term future of how we can work more closely with the council, not just on the leisure facilities, but on integrating Ocean into the Queen's Drive development and getting the best out of Ocean, because it is isolated at the moment. It's sort of at the end of the road instead of at the beginning of the development. And just to say, Councillor, we welcome the opportunity to move to a new phase of collaboration, of partnership, and open book transparent accounting on a monthly basis, so that we can demonstrate to you as a council just what value we are providing, not just in terms of finance, but in terms of health and well-being, because they are substantial, what we're doing. So, and as I think the previous speaker mentioned right at the start, we are moving into a new age within leisure. We did discuss this earlier today, that I think the remit for LED will move more towards providing social benefits, health and welfare benefits and social value, as well as the financial value that we're providing and have provided for 15 years. Just picking up one of the other points, I think we're saving the authority £1 million a year, £1 million a year saving by running it through a charitable trust. And once we're through COVID, we will return to providing a £1 million a year saving by running it through LED. So we need to get through this COVID crisis. We need to get into a position in the new year where we can sit and plan together a better partnership and monitoring relationship which demonstrates that value and provides as much added value to the council as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And Nick, Councillor Hookway, your points are well made, and we will take those into the forum, and please keep reminding us on that. I've got Councillor Ian Hall. Councillor Hall, I suspect this is just going to be a declaration of interest, is that correct?
No, it won't be, Chair, but thank you very much. I obviously do have my declaration that I'm the chairman of Cllr Lawn Sports Centre in Axminster, which is a charitable organisation that provides education through sport. And as Councillor Molding has said, that we have had exploratory talks for LED about the possibility of doing some partnership working in the future. If that ever materialises, who knows? But
okay, so Councillor Hall, can I ask you to address the recommendations? We've had a lot of pæans of praise for LED, the work they do, the necessity to the human body of exercise. We get all of that. So can you please address the points in the debate? Thank you.
Would it be easier if you actually told me what to say, Chair? Because I actually would like to really, from knowledge, to actually put some context. And this actually takes back to one of the speakers earlier on, Mr. Bernhardt. Now, when we, as Cllr Lawns, we're actually a charitable trust, and so are LED. We're the same, but we're so much different. We try to look at our very local area of Axminster to provide sport for those people. But LED makes it so much more inclusive to the members of the Axminster parish, as it's been said, with the GP practices. And the list goes on. We've already seen what the savings are. And we know that what this would actually cost the district council if it did go down a different path, which we don't want to really discuss or before. But this is absolutely imperative. This has been a success story at East Devon, as far as I can remember. So all I would say is I fully support the recommendations, Chairman, and I hope that the Cabinet also do as well. Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hall, for your brevity. It is much appreciated, and apologies, we're under these particular conditions. We have knowledge that there are power cuts across East Devon that are affecting people's communications. So just there's nobody else from outside the committee. So can I come back into Cabinet, please? And I think I've got Councillor Jack Rowland to start with. Jack, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think anybody that knows me knows that I'm passionate about health and well-being in our area. So I take on board everything that's been said so far. I'm not going to repeat anything because by and large I agree with most of the points that have been made. I think it's vitally important about the services that are being provided within East Devon. They were important even before COVID. They've just been exacerbated now because of what's been happening. I could go on for quite a long time, but I won't, because as I said, a lot of the points have already been made by non-cabinet members. I don't wish to repeat them, but I'm totally in favour of the recommendations that have been made. I would just like to clarify one point. I think the point that was being made that if these services had been provided in-house, the point that was being made was under the government scheme about the income guarantee scheme, then we would have been able to recover 70% plus of the lost income. But because of the arrangement as it stands at the moment, we're not able to. But of course, there is this £100 million grant that's been made available for leisure services, where we are going to be making an application to hopefully recover some of the money that hopefully we're going to be agreeing to pay. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Jack, for that. And coming next, I think we have Councillor Jeff Young, and then Councillor Paul Haywood, and then Councillor John Loudon. Jeff Young, please. Jeff, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Jeff, thank you.
I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I would like to thank Peter Gilpin and Bridget Jones for being here tonight and for keeping the ship afloat in these very difficult times. Councillor Moulding did make a very valuable point about business rates. In fact, if you work out how much business rates we've saved over the years, it's less than what the money we are proposing to give to LED now. LED provide a valuable facilities for the residents of East Devon, as you've heard from other councillors. It's a great shame we find that we are in this predicament through no fault of LED's management, and I totally support and in favour of the 4 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Can we go to Councillor Paul Haywood next, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry you're having some internet difficulties. Yeah, well, I mean, I'll echo what Councillor Young said. The recommendations are sound. That we, to coin that phrase, we are where we are. But listening to members from the opposition group, I am drawn towards the recommendation. Excuse me, let me scroll back up. The recommendation 3, that of course we will make a bid jointly with LED for the government funding. And I think it's pertinent to mention, if you go through the report to 4.7 and 4.10, I think there's a message that needs to be sent here. Councils, leisure providers, chief executives, professional bodies are all writing to central government, but we're not even getting the courtesy of a response. Now, that's outrageous. That's outrageous, because the government is putting councils, district councils, providers in an impossible situation, because we will be made out to be the baddies if we withdraw these facilities. And yet a great many, and I've had some vigorous conversations with all of you about this, a great many residents in East Devon do not use these facilities, and yet they're being expected through their council tax to pay for them. Now, we had a discussion earlier, that's called collective responsibility. Not all of us use libraries, but we pay for them. Not all of us use the fire service, but we pay for them. So I get that. But what I would expect is every single member of this authority, whatever their political rosette colour, to lobby their MPs and get some movement on this. I'm afraid writing to our MPs and the ministers and getting no response is disgusting. And I'm afraid that message needs to be said here to the audience watching and to anyone who listens to this afterwards. This is a fault of government. They have not thought out their funding process, and they are leaving us and all of our residents and the finances of this council and the finances of LED on a knife edge. I think that needs to be said. But I am very grateful for the support that I've heard from members across the council here, that they recognise what LED does. And I will be voting for these recommendations when the time comes, which I hope will be very soon, because the internet is flicking on and off here, to come to that vote. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Haywood. Councillor John Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow on from what Councillor Haywood has just been talking about, and I think also the direction of travel that Councillor Rylance was talking about. And I have a recommendation for a new recommendation 4, which would then mean the existing 4 becomes 5. Chair, are you with me if I read it out?
No, absolutely. Nice and slowly, please, for our clerks.
No, thank you. Right. So the new recommendation 4 would be that local district, well, if I may, I'll read it, and I'm very happy to make sure it's in the hands of Henry Gordon Lennox very quickly, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, John.
It says that that local district MPs, as a matter of urgency, are all asked whether they are willing to lobby ministers to ensure that leisure trusts, such as LED, receive COVID-related support funding in an equitable way to non-trust leisure providers to ensure a level financial playing field across the leisure sector. Cabinet will also ask all the district's MPs to use their influence as members of the governing party to set up an urgent meeting with the relevant minister or preferably Secretary of State, where they, alongside representatives of this council and representatives of this council's leisure provider, LED, can explain the difficulties facing both organisations of the government's failure to provide LED and other leisure trusts with COVID-related support funding, and to demand that such funding is immediately forthcoming. Thank you, Chair.
Is the Chair still with us? Perhaps not. Councillor Loudon, are you able to email that or forward it by some mechanism to our DS team and Mr. Gordon-Lennox?
I hope
I have already got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Hoping that the chair was going to be here, I haven't written it down, but it seems perfectly fine to me, and I would be happy to second that. But as I'm now sitting in the chair temporarily, is any other member of Cabinet happy to second
I'll
that
second
proposal?
it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. So that is a new recommendation 4, which bumps. Sorry, Councillor Skinner, you're visible on screen. Would you like to say something?
Okay, sorry.
Right, okay, sorry, time has passed. Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, Paul, about this. I'm on the phone, but I don't think you can hear me, which is very strange. I don't know what's going on there.
We can hear you, Chair. The proposal has been made by Councillor Loudon. Mr. Gordon-Lennox has that recommendation in full, and it's been seconded by Councillor Jackson. So that forms recommendation 4, which bumps recommendation, the old 4 to 5. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Leader, Deputy Chair. Councillor Dan Ledger, please.
Sorry, Chair, that's an old hand. All the points have been made, so I won't make them again.
Thank you very much, Dan. Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you very much. I'll keep this really short. I'm fully supportive of the recommendations as drafted. My one suggestion would be that I'd be more than happy to be considered for the monitoring forum, and possibly in place of the portfolio holder for sustainable communities and homes, because I equally feel that it falls within the corporate services portfolio. So I'm just putting that out there as an offer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bailey. Yes, I had looked at that earlier today, and I would be happy to support that as an idea. Can I just ask Mr. Gordon-Lennox, do we need to make a decision on that tonight because it's not in the recommendations, or can we just deal with this subsequently?
In terms of the membership, the committed membership to the forum, do you mean?
It's frozen.
It's frozen. Okay, so the recommendation is tied to the membership that is listed. So I think if the Cabinet wants to do that, that is a change that you would want to make tonight because it's an onward recommendation to Council.
Okay, thank you. So we reach a point. Let me look for some blue hands. Councillor Armstrong.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's just to say that I'm happy to come off that forum and let the corporate services portfolio holder sit on in my place. If you just wanted confirmation of that, thank you. And I'm in support of all the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Okay, Councillor Loudon, back to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Can we then, as Cabinet, accept and therefore amend the recommendations in line with Councillor Bailey / Councillor Armstrong's comments?
I'm happy to agree that, if anybody can hear me. I don't know if anybody can. You can, okay. Yes, I think that's okay for us. So we've got the 5 recommendations there now. We need to amend, according to Henry's advice, recommendation number, where's the one about the number 4, wouldn't we, slightly, to just include that extra detail. about it being the corporate and COVID-19 portfolio holder rather than the homes and communities. But thanks, Henry. And other than that, I think we're probably good to go to a vote. So if I can hand over, please, to Debbie to take a vote from us.
So just before I do, if I can just confirm that it is as printed with Councillor Loudon's wording. I'm happy to reread that if anybody wants it, but otherwise that will be included. And what is now recommendation 5 with additional wording to reflect the swap out of the portfolio holder for sustainable homes and communities with the portfolio holder for corporate services and COVID. Forgive me with the title, but COVID recovery and whatever. I've forgotten the full title, but with Councillor Bailey anyway.
Okay, so members of the Cabinet, if you could please use your green tick if you agree with those recommendations, or a red cross if you're against, or blue hand if you're abstaining. Thank you. And for the benefit of those watching us online, the vote is now taking place. And I have 8 votes for, 9 votes for, and that is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. I think Councillor Arnott, Chair, has left us again. I feel very sorry for him on his birthday, being bounced in and out of the meeting. So I believe, thank you for everyone for attending. That brings our meeting to an end. And I would like to thank everyone for their patience and perseverance and tolerance of the disruption in the internet age. And also to all the members of the public watching online and to members of council outside of Cabinet who've also attended and given up their time. Can I remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments and anything you say or appear to say will be live to the public. Thank you very much.